as the first-century Jewish historian Josephus noted. Wood was so scarce in Jerusalem during the 1st century AD, that the Romans were forced to travel 10 miles from Jerusalem, to secure timber for their siege machinery. The condemned man was made to carry his own cross to the place of crucifixion outside the city walls. According to the Roman literary sources, those condemned to crucifixion never carried the complete cross, despite the common belief to the contrary and despite the many modern reenactments of Jesus' walk to Golgotha. The condemned man typically carried the crossbeam, patibulum, across his shoulders that had just been ripped open by the flogging. This crossbeam would have weighed from 75 to 125 pounds. This procession to the site of crucifixion was ordinarily led by a complete military guard, headed by a centurion. A signed titulus which told what the condemned man was guilty of, was sometimes carried by a soldier and sometimes put around the condemned man's neck. Later the sign would be attached to the top of the cross. For now just imagine Jesus after no sleep, the hemashidrosis, the flogging, and still having the crown of thorns on his head, carrying a beam weighing anywhere from 75 to 125 pounds, through winding roads up hills, down hills for approximately 2,000 feet, a little over 1/3 of a mile.
In this humiliating form of punishment, the condemned man is forced to carry the instrument of his own death along narrow, crowded streets. The patibulum is heaved upon the wounded shoulders and back of Jesus. His body sags under the weight.
The cross itself is a very heavy timber. Although it's going to be reused many times, the objective is to make it last a long time. The timber is unfinished. It's not a lovely sanded down timber. It's just cut out with adze, so it's quite rough and even injures the skin when it's being carried.
Here I'm saying now he's in a beginning state of shock. I see this brutal beating which would cause traumatic shock. I see the blood losses from the injuries to the skin all over. I see the intensive sweating, and I see this fluid accumulation around the lungs, the pleural effusion. Here I'm saying now he's in a beginning state of shock.
I can't imagine how a person who's been whipped or has been injured in ways would be expected to carry a very heavy load. I would anticipate that the average individual would not be able to tolerate that for more than a few feet.
There is some evidence in the sources that certain cities in the Roman Empire had places of execution set up outside the walls of the city. The Roman historian Tacitus records that there was such a place in Rome on the Campus Esquilinus. Golgotha, outside the walls of Jerusalem, was to have been such a set place of execution. At these places of execution would have been permanently located the upright beam of the cross, stipes, onto which the crossbeam piece, which the condemned man carried, would be attached. There were two possible ways of erecting the crossbeam. The condemned man could be fastened to the cross lying on the ground at the place of execution, and so lifted up on the cross. Alternatively, it was probably usual to have the stake implanted in the ground before the execution. The victim was tied to the crosspiece, or as in the case of Jesus was attached by nails, he was laid on the ground, with his shoulders on the crossbeam. His arms were held out and nailed to the two ends of the crossbeam, then was hoisted up with the horizontal beam, and made fast to the vertical stake. After which the victim's feet were then nailed down against this vertical stake. As this was the simpler form of erection, and the carrying of the crossbeam patibulum was connected with the punishment for slaves, the crux commissa may be taken as the normal practice. The cross would probably have been not much higher than the height of a man,